Okay, we're just getting started this section. I think last week we read that long paragraph 1 there.
Yeah, that's as far as I got, eh?
Yeah. So I guess just I don't know, do you want me to read the summary or the paragraph? I suppose what's anyway, he's just saying that, you know, he's comparing this passage with chapter 13, verse 10, which has the same wording. It's a little longer verse, but it ends up with the same wording as this, and saying, "Here's the patience of the saints." Here we go. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity, and he that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. So the last clause of that verse is what's the same as verse 12 of the chapter we're studying here. And what he's saying is that that clause appearing in chapter 13 relates to the character of the saints, or the attributes of the saints, while this one in verse 12 relates to the saints themselves. They're giving expression to that character. I don't know if that's a really important observation or not, but that's what he's making in this verse, in this paragraph. And then in paragraph 2, he talks about the word "here," and that's the verse that we're studying is verse 12, which says, "Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they to keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus." So the word "today," rendered "here," is as if one should say "entode," that is, "tuple," in this place. "Tahode" signifies the things here, that is, the things transacted in this place. And I think that last part of that whole paragraph is what we need to latch onto, is giving us a definition of that Greek word in its true understanding. Would be saying the things transacted in this place are, it becomes the patience of the saints. The things transacted in this place are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. That's it.
So then if we go back to verse 11, where was that? No, I was looking actually in the paragraph, in the last paragraph of the section before, and it's talking about the temple. I'm thinking the temple is the here, but that's not right.
So that's a pretty simple scripture paragraph, and it kind of sets the stage for
The Babylon
considerations to come. Yeah. Okay, we'll get our teeth into a little bit more here in paragraph 3, which gives us talks about the reason for this expression of patience is divine retribution for persecution victims. Those who have been victims of persecution, which really are the saints collectively down through the ages. Even though we live today in a relative time of peace, we know that the heritage that we've come from it's not always been that way. "He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity," and that is, of course, just what we read from verse 10 of chapter 13. "Hence, in the third angel judgment, the beast is taken, and with him the pseudo-prophet or false prophet. The things represented by these symbols constitute a power that has led the saints and witnesses captive and killed them with the sword. Therefore, the power that killeth with the sword, by the sword must be killed, and that too by the sword wielded by the saints." And he takes us to Psalm 149, verses 6 to 9. "Let the high praises of God be in their mouth, and the two-edged sword in their hand, to execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishments upon the people, to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron, to execute upon them the judgment written. This honor have all his saints. Praise ye the Lord. Hence, also, in that section of the third angel judgment represented in the 11th verse, and further illustrated in the sickle scenes from the 14th to the 20th verses inclusive, the remnant of the hostile power of the blasphemers is slain with the sword of the faithful and true one, the commander-in-chief who judges and makes war in righteousness. So there's two passages there he takes us to, talking about the remnant of hostile power of the blasphemers in chapter 16:21. There fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent, and men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. And he also takes us to chapter 19, verse 11, which talks about the faithful and true one who judges and makes war in righteousness. And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. So in the summary of that paragraph, he's just saying that the source of the patience is the knowledge that the day of the Lord will set things right, and Yahweh will take back the power and the glory that are rightfully His and only His, and that the saints will have a part in that operation.
I have a question.
Yes.
That statement there, therefore the power that killeth with the sword, by the sword must be killed. I think, who are you talking about? But he goes on to say it's the same.
Okay.
And that you by the sword wielded by the saints.
Must be
Am I
by the sword wielded by the saints must be killed.
What?
They're the ones doing the killing.
They're the ones wielding the sword.
And why does it say they must be killed by the sword then?
No, it's okay. Let's just read here. The power that killeth with the sword, by the sword, must be killed, and the instruments, those managing the sword, that's doing the killing, are the saints.
The judgment sword,
Yeah, it's a sword of judgment.
not the initial sword.
So in other words,
By the sword of the saints must be killed.
similar to, it's kind of a, you might say the book of Esther is a sign of it, where the Jews were allowed to take up the sword against their persecutors.
Mhm.
That's the same here. It's the sword of retribution will be wielded by those who were killed by the sword in the first place.
Right. So, the verse that he's talking about there, that he bases this on, saying that, this is the reason for the patience is again, going back to that 10th verse of chapter 13, which says, He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. So those who are doing the killing will eventually themselves fall victim to the very sword that they were doing the killing with.
But you're saying the ones that's wielding the sword are the saints.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're doing the judgment.
The judgment
The ones that
sword.
will be wielding the sword.
So the saints will be working out the judgment against them. Carrying the sword. In other words, wielding the sword is carrying the
Yeah,
sword.
I understand. I know that, but just the way it reads, it sounds like the one that's wielding the sword is going to be killed. By the sword must be killed. Anybody killing with the sword, by the sword must be killed.
They get to the other side of the, it's not a convex, it's the concave. Gordon?
I mean, I know what's going on.
There's a statement that those who live by the sword will die by the sword.
Right.
That's kind of where that's going on.
Isn't that what Christ said to Peter? Blanket off the high priest's service
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, something to that effect. Yeah, somewhere. I don't know if he's got anything more here on the, in the expositor on that. So here, yeah, this is kind of a bit of an explanation. He that leadeth into captivity, that's the dragon and the beast, shall go into captivity at the hands of Christ. He that killeth with the sword, as the papacy has done, shall be killed with the sword at the hands of the Lord. So that the dragon and the beast have led into captivity, and they will go into captivity at the hands of Christ. And the papacy is killed with the sword, and it will turn around against them. The sword will turn around against them at the hands of the Lord. Will wield the sword against them. And so that's. Okay, any other comments? We'll move on. Paragraph 4, saying that the patience and faith consists of hope in the things prophesied and promised. It says, what then are the saints waiting for, and what do they believe in? In other words, what is their patience and faith as brethren of Christ? The answer is that they believe in and are waiting for the slaying of Daniel's fourth beast, the destruction of his body politic, and the giving of it to the burning flame, and for the giving of the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven to the people consisting of the saints of the Most High Ones. And that's from Daniel 7, verse 11 and 27, and apocalyptically exhibited in chapters 14 and 15. That's 14 and 15 of Revelations that we're studying here right now. So you're saying the faith and patience of the saints is the same as that which justifies. In other words, an absolute conviction that Yahweh exists and that He can and will accomplish His declared purpose. And that's the same thing by which Abraham was justified. Absolute faith, belief, and conviction. Daniel 7, verse 11 takes us to. It says, I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. And as concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives are prolonged for a season and a time. That's talking about the judgments that were meted out, or are to be meted out in the time of the end. So, and also verse 27. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey Him. Any comments on that, or any questions?
What are the people of the saints?
I think it's another expression for the saints. I can go back to that here. There it shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. The people of the saints are to be distinguished from the saints of the previous verses. As we've interpreted as we have interpreted it. The latter term relates to those who have been used by God to oppose the papacy in a similar manner to the description of the Medes and Persians as Yahweh's sanctified ones to reduce the power of historic Babylon. In contradistinction, the people of the saints relates to the approved believers who shall inherit the kingdom. They comprise a numerically minor portion of the two witnesses of Revelations 11. This is how Brother Thomas defines the term in Elpis Israel on page 338. Although in the exposition of Daniel he extends it to include the nation of redeemed Israel because, of course, its immortal rulers as well as its mortal people will comprise a whole in the age to come, even as the leaders of a nation can represent an entire nation. But primarily and fundamentally, the term people of the saints applies to the true Israel of God. So there's a distinction there between saints and people of the saints, as it appears in Daniel.
Yeah. That's the one I was thinking.
Yeah. So, good question, Peter. It's good to get those things out and verified so there's no misunderstanding of those terms as they're used here. Oops, sorry. Finger slipped. Paragraph 5. And he talks a little bit about the identity of the true saints in this paragraph, just that we were kind of speaking about when we were defining who the people of the saints were. The identity of the true saints are those who have the demonstrated faith of Jesus. In other words, faith in action. In the 12th verse, the here leaves the reader without question as to who these saints are. They are those who have the faith of Jesus. True, the mother of harlots and of all the abominations of the earth, the harlots and abominations themselves, Latins, Greeks, state church and dissenting Protestants of every name and denomination of blasphemy in the court of the Gentiles, all of them claim to have the faith of Jesus. Of this there is no doubt. It is easy to make claims, but not so easy to establish them. The text before us, however, determines the question against them all. They who keep the faith of Jesus are there declared to be those who keep the commandments of the deity, the obedient. They are, all of them, the reverse of this. The spirit of obedience to the divine laws is not in them. The only spirit that is their familiar spirit is the spirit that works in the children of disobedience, who are by nature the children of wrath. Takes us to Ephesians 2 verses 2 and 3. It says, "You as ye quicken who are dead in trespasses and sins, wherein in time past ye walked according to the course of this world, and according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience, among whom also we all had our conversation or our walk and conduct in times past in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. But God, who is rich in mercy, for his great love wherewith he loved us, even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us together with Christ. By grace ye are saved, and has raised us up together and made us sit together in heavenly places in Christ Jesus." It says, "The Christians of every name and denomination of Christendom," as the phrase is, "are not the saints. For they neither keep the commandments of the deity, nor the faith of Jesus. They are piously alien from them all. Their own published confession of themselves is true. They are, as they say, miserable offenders, who have erred and strayed from the Almighty's ways, and have too much followed the devices and desires of their own hearts, and offended against his holy laws, having left undone those things which they ought to have done, and done those things which they ought not to have done, and there is no help in them." This is a general confession made every Sunday morning by the whole congregation of the Anglican state superstition throughout the British Isles, North America, and the Indies. Everywhere, in short, where Episcopalianism is found,
Miserable offenders who thus stigmatize themselves as being utterly destitute of spiritual health are recognized as good and orthodox Christians by all their pious contemporaries, though somewhat too aristocratic and overbearing. In thus recognizing them, they are partakers with them. Listen to the individual outpourings of state harlot adherents and dissenting earth abomination members, and the same vein of self-condemnation will be found to run through them all. They all place themselves in the category of miserable offenders in whom is no help. This being their own testimony concerning their inward man, we have no right to dispute it. We accept it as the truth and nothing but the truth. This confession, however, is utterly incompatible with the claim of being the keepers of the commandments of the deity and the faith of Jesus. The keepers of these do not err and stray from the Father's ways like lost sheep, but they walk in His ways because they keep His commandments in the faith of Jesus. And being His sheep, they know His voice, and a stranger they will not follow. No, miserable offenders have no identity with these, but are of them who worship the beast in His image and receive the sign of His name, the unhappy subjects of the judgments of the third angel power. So we're just talking about the identity of the true saints, and that it is those whose discipleship embraces more than just mere ritual and works. It is not difficult to fall into a self-centered ritual of observances and confessionals. It is another thing to unquestionably understand and believe in the one true Yahweh, that He does truly exist and that He is powerful to accomplish His purpose, and subsequent to that, undertaking a lifestyle of righteous actions for the express purpose of pleasing Him and giving glory to His name. Motive is so fundamentally paramount. Okay.
A little bit of a tangent here to that quote that he gives from Ephesians. Brother Jim Phillips, when he was doing a kind of a summary of the history of the doctrines on the nature of Christ, talked about how Andrew went off the rails a bit in misinterpreting that quote.
Yeah.
He thought it was God's enmity personally to each of us for our nature, whereas very clearly here Brother Thomas talks about disobedience.
Yes.
Transgression.
Yeah, it's about transgression, not about where we come
Nature.
from. Or
Yeah. And it's nice to see that Brother Thomas clearly explained that verse.
Right. Any other comments on that? Says quite a mouthful there as it goes through that. Good word.
When he says, we all claim to have the faith of Jesus, I think we probably have to interpret that we have the gospel as, we have the understanding as that Jesus held. None of us have the absolute faith in terms of our belief isn't as strong as Jesus. We hope it's similar, but it's not as powerful as his was to carry him through that great trial. But I think he's talking about we have the same beliefs, we have the same hope, which churches definitely don't.
Yeah, it's important to know what he means there by the term faith, and I think you're on track with that when your comment there. But just look up the definition here from Strong's on that.
Could be a noun or verb, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's having faith, as an attribute, or it can be the faith, which is a noun or description of. Move over here. Try that again. The word pistis, meaning persuasion, credence, moral conviction of religious truth or the truthfulness of God or a religious teacher, especially reliance upon Christ for salvation, constancy in such profession. By extension, the system of religious truth itself, which is the noun part of it. But notice, how it is translated: assurance, belief, believe, faith, and fidelity. Faith is only just, when you see the word faith in there, you have to remember that at the base of this word is also belief and conviction. When we see belief, we need to think faith, and when we see faith, we need to think belief, because it's all the same word.
Isn't there a difference? There's the faith, and then there's faith in whatever.
Our belief in, our conviction. And again, the faith, the conviction, the belief. And to have the belief of Christ is not to believe that He's not coming back to the earth, or that He's not going to establish a reign of 1,000 years. That's not the faith of Jesus. That's not the belief of Christ. He didn't believe those things. And so it's really important to establish the fundamentals of what's at the base of the conviction, which is, the truth, the system of belief itself. Paragraph 6, it makes a contrast, or maybe we should say continues a contrast between the hopes of the true saints and that of false saints. It says that crucial rantists meaning besprinkled infant sprinklers.
Very specific word.
Yeah. Gotta get this clear. That they are in no way related to the saints is clear from their total ignorance of the signification of the things symbolized in chapter 13, verses 1 to 10, and chapter 14, verses 1 to 20. Let's just take a quick look at that to remind ourselves what he's talking about. Chapter 13, 1 to 10 was where we went through the establishment of the system, the papal system, the state church system. And through to the right through to where it talks about being led into captivity and going into captivity. He that tells the sword must be killed with a sword. And so it is that phase of the system, not the Holy Roman Empire, but the from Constantine forward to the time of the Holy Roman Empire. That's chapter 13, verses 1 to 10. And chapter 14, verses 1 to 20. Well, we're going through much of that right now. We've already taken the first 12 verses. Basically, he's talking about the judgments that are meted out upon that system. And goes into the verses 13 on to verse 20 is the continuation of the judgments that come upon them at the time of the end. So that's what he's talking about there. So he says these who are he's saying not in any way related to the saints is because of their total ignorance all of the signification of these things that we've just been studying about. He says their greatest luminary, Reverend Mr. Eliot, and Eliot is the Horae Apocalypticae, which Brother Thomas followed to a great extent and helped him a lot in revealing a lot of the significances of the things contained in Revelations. But here he has levels quite a great criticism against him. Here it says their greatest luminary, Reverend Mr. Eliot, gives nearly the whole of this 14th chapter to go by, and the little does he speculate upon from verse 1 to 5. He expounds as finding its fulfillment in the timely events of the Lutheran rebellion. The saints are waiting for the things represented in the first 11 verses of this chapter. The besprinkled subjects of the sign of the beast's name are not. Hence the patience symbolized in haughty topo in this place is not their patience. They are waiting to go to heaven in Transkyenia, where there is neither time nor space. It takes the credulity of the beast's worshippers to believe in a place of such ample dimensions as heaven, where there is no space. It takes the credulity of the beast's worshippers to believe in a place of such ample dimensions as heaven, where there is no space. It's quite a statement. But nothing is too absurd for the patience of them who keep not the faith of Jesus. The reference to Rantis aptly illustrates the point he's making here, because when it is as I said, he sprinkles infant sprinklers. Infants know nothing of God, and cute and innocent as they are, all their actions and interests are totally self-centered, everything but responsible. They're totally dependent on others. This is spiritually descriptive of the apostasy. It is all about what's in it for me. It's very apt. I was wondering for a little while why he was just using that particular. There's a lot of other things he could have brought out to describe them or to call them, but he uses that phrase to describe them or to identify them, and it's quite applicable to the nature of what they are.
What's his point about space?
Well, they're talking about a place where they can go and they can identify it. It's a great place, and it's a space, but he said there is no space to it. So really, what is it? There's nothing there.
You see, the Lutherans believe in the spirit going to heaven.
No.
It's probably a sort of a unique reference to John 14, where in Father Sussman mentions
The abiding places. There's space there. They're saying, I got my space there. It's reserved for me. And there is no space. Heavens without dimensions. That's the point he's making.
The Lutherans have told me that when you die, your spirit goes to heaven, and then when Christ comes, they come back with him. They're united with the body, and they're judged, and then if they're saints, they all go to heaven, the rest are burned up.
Yeah.
Great.
I think what Brother Thomas is saying here, if I get it right, is if you have these beliefs similar to that of the beast worshippers, that you have, in a sense, of greater blind faith than the true believers, because you're basing your faith on less substance than what the facts of the truth are.
It is true. Yeah.
That's right. It's a fancy.
So there's nothing too absurd, as he said there, for those with that type of belief system. You believe what you're told. So nothing will stop you.
It's a blind ignorance, really, that's what it is. Mr. Neal?
He would have been one of those at
Oh,
one
yeah.
time. So
Been there, done that.
Yes.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Yeah.
And they were.
But if you try to tell them any different, they defend it.
Yeah.
For bigger
Oh, yeah.
sales and,
So this term Rantis, You said it's specific. That he calls them this name specifically. Is it because of the marking, nature of infant sprinkling? Like you're kind of marked with that?
I think it's because of the lack of the need of any responsibility.
The ignorance.
The ignorance. Yeah.
That makes
You
sense.
don't have to know anything
Yeah.
to have faith.
Right. Yeah.
And God doesn't require that of us. He says you need to base your faith on logical things. There's substance. Faith is the substance of things hoped for.
There's love in that. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah. Okay, paragraph 7. I think we're not trying to finish this and get done with this section. This verse illustrates the saints as the Christ body in belligerent action. This verse 12 that he's talking about. It says, in this vision of the first, second, and third angels. So he's taking us back here to the previous sections we've studied as well. The vision of the first, second, and third angels are brought to light the saints themselves. Here, or in this place of the apocalypse, are seen the saints in the execution of the judgment written. This is equivalent to declaring that the holy angels and the Lamb of verse 10 are symbolical of Jesus and his brethren, and identical with the Lamb and the 144,000 of the first verse. These at the head of their forces are the power symbolized by the second and third angels. They begin their career in prophesying again before many peoples, nations, and tongues, and kings, as the first angel, making proclamation in mid-heaven. And they finish it in binding the dragon and celebrating their victory over the beast and over his image and over the sign and number of his name, standing upon a sea of glass, having the harps of the deity. Revelations 15:2. So as it were a sea of glass, mingled with fire. Read Brother Thomas's translation there, which is a little bit. I saw as it were a glassy sea which had been mingled with fire, and the conquerors of the beast and of his image and of his sign and of the number of his name, standing upon the glassy sea, having the harps of the deity. I think the past tense there is very appropriate in that verse. It says, in all their career, the nations rage and the kingdoms are moved, but he uttered his voice and the earth melted. When their work of judgment is in progress, it will be said, come, behold the works of Yahweh, who hath set desolations in the earth. He is making wars to cease to the end of the earth. He will break the bow, and will cut the spear in sunder, and will burn the chariots in the fire. Be still, and know that I am Elohim. I will be exalted among the nations, and I will be exalted in the earth. Yahweh Sabaoth, he who shall be host, is with us. A strong place for us is the Elohim of Jacob. And that code. Okay, so that code is from Psalms 46, 6-11. Basically, we've read it, so I won't read it again, but you can see the passage he takes it from there. In verse 10, he's often quoted, be still and know that I am God. So in summary, the saints who are configured as the rainbow angel or the multitudinous Christ, of course, they first put out the invitation, as we saw under the signification of the first angel, to all who will listen, to submit to the return of Christ and be saved from the outpouring of divine wrath to come. After which, they preside over that outpouring and effect the transition of the earth from the chaotic mess that man has made of it to a beautiful place of order and divine righteousness where the will of Yahweh is accomplished. Gordon?
that quotation there, Psalm 46, I think it's about verse 10 maybe. Will be exalted among the heathen. That you can see that how God in the past has, at times, has done that. You know, like with Nebuchadnezzar and
Cyrus.
and different ones where he absolutely made his point to the point where they said, "Now I know that there's no God but this God," and that's going to happen in a bigger way. The whole earth, not just sort of the chief among the nations.
Right.
That's quite a statement to be still and know that I am alone, because this day when we're bombarded on all sides with every kind of propaganda and every kind of noise and confusion and everything else, it's, and then the knowledge too, to be still. That's like meditate.
Mm-hmm.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
It's hard to find a quiet place.
Christ, did that. We often read of him going up into a mountain by himself to pray, where he stayed all night sometimes. It's a necessary thing to be. That's it.
I think it's a lost art.
Yes.
David did it all the time, obviously, from what he wrote in the Psalms, but we don't know how to do it.
No. Dave?
Another tangent point for me, but I was talking about the sea and the sea glass. I never quite grasped that. I knew the sea talked about nations or multitudes of people, but I thought in that case there it talked about the redeemed. And I don't think that's right. The sea of glass is the mortal nations of the world that were put at peace under the reign of Christ. And the reason why I kind of came to this realization is that in Revelation 22 it talks about then there was no more sea. So in the end, the sea is totally gone. Either the sea is either evaporated into the air and made immortals that are saints with Christ, or have been burned up in fire and judgment. There's no more sea. So it's either you go up or you're gone.
Yeah.
Which is something I never quite caught, that aspect of the sea.
Yeah. That's a good point. I guess our time is up. Finished off that section. Next time you're here, we'll go to section 10.